Hello, everybody. My name is Tosin, and I'm a part of Group 8, which is Chapter 8, Organizational Culture. So, since it's about culture, we are exploring the essence of culture. And within this culture, employees know what is expected from them in an organization. So, we will talk about how it develops, such as ways in which culture provides the framework and foundation. Also, the 3 levels of culture, which includes artifacts, benefits and values, and assumptions. We'll also talk about how it could drive competitive advantage and also examine the role that leaders play in shaping the culture. So, what exactly is culture? Culture is the way individuals in an organization uniquely and collectively think, feel, and act. And with that, it provides employees with a roadmap and rules for how work gets done and how people interact with each other in an organization. So, with that, elements that are helpful in this. What is it? Okay, I'm gonna cut that out. With that being said, elements that are helpful in deciphering culture include an appreciation for the company's values and philosophy or purpose, an understanding of the group's boundaries, an understanding of power and structure, an understanding of the work rules and norms, and an evaluation of the company. So, impact of culture performance. Before I go into the intensity of the values, there's something called subcultures. Subcultures is cultures that form around geographic or organizational units in a company. So we have competing forces, strong culture, weak culture, and passive culture. So the most known is the strong culture. And strong culture can lead to better levels of performance, higher financial metrics, and distinctive competitive advantage. It also promotes ethical guidelines that define acceptable and unacceptable behavior, helping the organization require less coordination and monitoring. Lastly, it clarifies roles by being explicit about what is expected in an organization.
Hello everybody, my name is Nana Day. So I'm here to discuss the levels of organizational culture. There are 3 levels to organizational culture. But before I go into the levels, I'm going to talk about the visible and the hidden culture that defines the organizational culture. So the different levels of culture has its own manifestations. My example today will be Nordstrom's store. Nordstrom develops a culture that allows employees to do whatever it takes to serve its customers. Let's say, for an example, you walk into Nordstrom and you need to return something. The clerk is not going to ask you who, what, where, when, and why. They're going to pay you back of what you paid because they believe that you are telling the truth. They are doing what's in the best interest of the customer. They do not need to be told what to do because they have this pre-existent expectancy of the organizational culture. They know Nordstrom is a high-end, lavish store that people shop in, so they want to be able to provide the same amount of energy and the same amount of mindset that you are walking into that store knowing you're about to spend a lot of money. The 3 basic levels starts off with artifacts, goes to beliefs and values, goes to assumptions, as Tosin has mentioned. Artifacts is the day-to-day behaviors that can be observed. Beliefs and values is what is deemed important by members of an organization. Assumptions are the underlying essence of why members of an organization act as they do. And with all that put together, for managers to understand and assess the potential of an organization's culture, they must start with the visible artifacts moving backwards, meaning they're going to start with artifacts, move to the beliefs and values, and assumptions. To go into detail about artifacts, it is the visible organizational structures, processes, and languages. All the phenomenon that one sees, hears, and feels when one encounters a new group with an unfamiliar culture. Before I go more into detail, let's go back to my example of Nordstrom. When you walk into the Nordstrom store, what do you see? You see bright lights, attentive clerks, store workers. You see many options, high pricings. You know you're going into a store with high value. So visible products include the language, the technology, the artistic creations, the style. They're easy to identify, fairly simple to note which are present and how they work, and the understanding of its existence. Next, it goes into the beliefs and values, the meanings that members of an organization attach to artifacts. The drive is what is considered important in the organization. Organizational values originate from the founder and are passed along. They are communicated formally and informally. So going back to Nordstrom, the founder had made a mission statement for all of their workers to abide by. Based off that mission statement, all the workers know what is expected of them to do once they enter that work environment. And lastly, the assumptions, a behavior that stemmed from a belief held by a group. When a behavior becomes an assumption, it is no longer visible. It can be intrinsic, which is naturally, instinctive, which is automatically, or unconscious. It becomes deeply embedded in the organization. So putting all together the artifacts, the beliefs and values, and the assumptions is what makes the organizational culture successful. It's what makes the organization itself successful.
Hey everybody, my name is Brian Cashin, and I'm going to be covering how culture develops. So essentially, culture is created immediately by any group of people interacting with each other, established by their norms of behavior. So in real life, it would be if you were on, say, a sports team, or if you have roommates, you develop some sort of vernacular or nicknames or other ways you act around each other. However, in organizations, culture is created by the founder. It's based on their experiences, their goals, their desires, what they want for their company. Then it's carried out by other organizational leaders, and then it's implemented by their own teams to socialize into the everyday format of the company. We'll talk about that later. The example from the book has Home Depot. Home Depot's founder wanted to serve their customers the best way that they could above anything, and they did that, and they built the way their stores were constructed and how their employees would act toward the customers, and then they decided to appoint a new CEO, and he came in with his own sort of agenda, and he had his own beliefs, and that sort of clashed with the culture that Home Depot had already set up. So, and then months later, everything started to change, and then the CEO was then demoted. So let's go back to the people that established the culture. We have the founder. The roles that the founder plays is they're supposed to absorb any anxiety with the risk. So they come in with belief that what they're doing is the right thing, and they're making the right decision. So say they make a decision that's not really great for the company, but it's sticking to their core values, and if someone comes down on them, it's up to them to hold steady and put on a face and say what we're doing is right. That way the employees and the other leaders aren't sort of crumbling from the bottom, and then everything sort of dissolves. They're supposed to make assumptions stick. So once again, they're supposed to hold their values above anything else. Say they make a decision and it's not really great for financial interests, but it sticks to their core values for the company. That really gives the founder a lot of power over its employees, the other organizational leaders, and then really the public. They sort of put on this message about who they are and what they're about. They're supposed to encourage innovation. The founders are the only people in the company that don't have anyone to answer to, because everyone's supposed to answer to them. So it's up to them to be unique. They're supposed to inspire, and they're supposed to be creative on driving home the company values. So they're trying to get everyone else to sort of come up with their own way to attribute to those values. The next we have the organizational leaders. They're responsible for the company results. I like to think about this going back to the case we covered in class before with the Orioles and the A's having your general managers and your managers. The general managers put the people on the field, but the manager is supposed to be the one coaching the players up and sort of delivering the results, and that's exactly who the organizational leaders are. They're really responsible for the results. They're supposed to train everyone to be a company person. You're supposed to bring them in, get them to do the things the way the company wants them to do, sort of bring them into that culture, bring them along in a way that the company is proud of, and that they want every single person to act that way. They're supposed to be a role model. They're supposed to drive managers and employees to be inspired and empowered. They're supposed to reward them with pay and non-pay perks. They're supposed to challenge them, and they're supposed to do all that by following the stated values that the company is under. The real life example that I came up with was Chick-fil-A. You come in, everyone is nice and polite. They're dressed and groomed well, and every single year for their employees, they're giving out scholarships. They're giving them breaks with free food. they're really just developing great manners and creating really great people, and and they're closed every Sunday, so they guarantee that everyone gets at least one day off a week, and that's pretty great. And then we have the roles of the teams. Going back to Chick-fil-A, you come in, and if you have a good experience or a bad experience, that's sort of based on your contact that you have with your local team. The teams work together, they take on problems, they make everyone's experience a lot better, or at least they're supposed to. They're supposed to create organizational routines and create a team-based culture. Maybe corporate has a way of doing things, but then this one little branch has its own way of doing it, and maybe it's more efficient that way. They're creating organizational routines or norms, and finally they're supposed to prove the founder right. They're supposed to take those values and the way that they act and sort of test them every single day and make them stick and make them a reality for the founder. The case that we have in this section is with the Chilean miners. Back in 2010, 33 miners were devastated and trapped in a mine, and they were immediately faced with adversity as they were trapped underground for a total of 69 days. But immediately they had to interact with each other. They had to organize a democracy and assign leaders. They had to pick people to lead prayer, people to boost morale, facilitate supplies and contact to the outside world, and they all participated in voting and making those decisions. The main message with that is that the culture sort of emerged because they were thrown right into it immediately. They had no decision but to interact with each other and make sure that everything went well. They need to work as one and put all personal beliefs aside and sort of abide by their new company's norms, because if they didn't, they wouldn't have been able to survive.
Hi, I'm Ashlee Latour. I'm going to be covering Section 6. It's going to be culture and crucial moments. So when dealing with an organization's culture, there's going to be 3 separate instances where culture is going to be very crucial to understand and to know about different organizations and even your own. So it's always important to understand culture with an organization, but these 3 instances are going to be very crucial. A new member joins the team, so they're going to need to know what are the do's and don'ts, what's accepted and what is not in your company. So for people that are already there, it's going to be important to show and make it known to this new person what is acceptable, what's not. As a new leader takes over, it's going to be important for them to understand what they're going into and what they're dealing with, so that the employees that are already there know what they're going to be expected, because that's what they've always been expected of. And when there's a merger or an acquisition happening with the company, it's going to be very important to understand not only your culture, but the culture of the company you're merging with. In order to make the most productive new company, and in order to keep everything the same or as close to the same as possible, so that new employees and old employees can come together, make the most production happen. In this section, there was a study identified that 90% of mergers fail, and that is solely based on the fact of clashing cultures. So companies aren't merging both cultures. They're just saying, well, this is the way we've done it, this is what we're going to do, instead of taking into consideration everything at large. Evaluating cultures in mergers and acquisitions, we're going to focus a little more on this in this section. So acquiring companies not only gain the money and the personnel from the company, but they also gain the resources, the processes, business models, and embedded priorities. So the example they gave us in the text was Cisco networking. So what they do is they carefully ensure that the acquired company they're getting fit into their culture. So instead of taking both cultures and merging them, they're just taking that company and merging them into their culture and their company mottos. They need to evaluate the aspects of each company's cultures and decide which to keep and which to discard. So most companies will take what's better for each instance. So maybe this company does something way better than what they've been doing, and they're like, yeah, let's take that. Well, this company is lacking in that department, so they're going to take on that culture. Whereas Cisco, since they're such a large and known company, they're going to discard everything that the other company's been doing and just fit them into their culture, which can be bad and can be good. However, in this instance for Cisco, it's been very good and very productive because they're still well known and still growing. But not every company can do that. You have to be the biggest, the best, in order to show that what your culture is doing is what's right for the network, the organization, and the company at large. So let's just go over some summary points from each section we've covered in this presentation. So section 1, we went over how culture provides parameters for work environments. So in large, we understand the do's and don'ts of the firm, knowing what is expected of us as employees and what is punishable by management or the supervisor or just the company founder. This is important just because if you know what's right and what's wrong, you're going to succeed more. Section 2, we went over the culture, that culture can be a strong driver of performance. So just in your everyday class like this one, if you're given the expectations ahead of time, then you're going to be more well prepared for the future and for future assignments and future projects. For section 3, we went over the 3 levels of culture: what is seen, what is known, and what is embedded. So at large, it's oftentimes you can replicate visible aspects but miss the underlying processes. So you can see on the outside what the company's doing, but behind it there's always a reason, there's always a process that they've been doing forever because it works. It's what's embedded in their culture. And that oftentimes isn't always seen by every organization. So if you're merging, you really need to find that underlying process that drives that company. Section 4 is culture derives from a shared concept of employee interactions and work ethic. So the more the company embeds the culture, the better it works. That's why older companies tend to do better business than startup companies, and that's why they've been around so long, is because their culture's embedded in that company and that the employees know what's expected, what's the outcome, and what they're supposed to be doing for their projects. Section 5 was paying attention to the culture around us. So it's important for firms to know the culture around them, to know their competition's culture, and to know the culture in which their organization is located in. So being aware of your surroundings and knowing what you'd be merging with if you were to merge your company. Knowing what you should take, what you should discard to make your business better. Some key terms we went over was artifacts. It's going to be visible organizational structures. So what you can actually see for face value of the company, what's going to be easiest for new members to locate and notice about your company. Assumptions, behavior stemmed from a belief. So this is what's going to be more underlying and more embedded in the company by the founders. So it's going to be harder to notice from outsiders' perspectives. Beliefs and values, it's going to be meanings attached to the artifacts. So it's stuff like if our teacher gives us a rubric for the paper, that's what he's expecting, that's what he believes is going to get us the best outcome from that work assignment. Culture, it's going to be the roadmap or the guide for employees' actions and work ethic. So it's pretty much a rubric in your class. It's going to be the roadmap to get you to the best result possible and to obtain the best work ethic from the students, from the organization's employees. Organizational commitment is going to be the desired end result. What are we starting this business for? What is our desired outcome of this organization? Socialization, understanding how work gets done. So if you go into the company not knowing how to produce the best analytics for it, you're not going to understand the socialization of that company's culture. Subcultures is our last one. It's going to be cultures that form around geographic units in the company. So this is going to be cultures within the accounting department, within the English department, in the school system. It's going to be cultures that are within the company at large as culture. And our interactive activity is just going to be a quick game of true or false. So I'm just going to go through and release the answers at the end. So you can just answer these on your own, and the answers will be in the comments below. Thank you.